documentary, The Uncondemned, right? And how did you get the idea for the first time?
Good question. So, like anything, it started with me getting mad. So in 2012, 4 years ago, there was if you think this presidential election is crazy, which it is, so 4 years ago, we thought that one was crazy. And during that time, there were quite a few people running for office saying really stupid things. And one of my very favorites was this man who was running for Senate in Missouri, who actually said that women could not get pregnant from rape because their bodies had a way of shutting down and preventing pregnancy. And I thought, well, okay, the Serbs didn't get that memo during the Balkan War. Are you kidding me? And then, so that started the rising anger in me. And then I started hearing politician after politician using this phrase, legitimate rape. And I thought, okay, you know what? I've had it. I'm going to do a story that tells the truth about what this is. And I'm going to put it so firmly in the realm of an act of torture, power, and humiliation, you will never get it out again. So I didn't want to do a story about how bad rape is in conflict, because we all know it's bad. I wanted to do a story about what to do about it, because at the end of the day, I don't think it's enough to make people angry. That's not useful. What you want to do is give people hope that they can do something. It's always great. The art of the possible is always terrific. And then it became a quest to find out when the first time that rape was prosecuted as a crime of war. And I was very surprised to find out that it happened in 1997.
Yeah, that's pretty incredible. I was pretty surprised by the dates on the documentary. I was like, oh, that was 18 years ago only. That's amazing. That's terrific, horrific. And I was just, but was Rwanda your first idea? Like, were you planning on filming maybe in another country or something?
Yeah, when you look for like what's the first time, honestly, I didn't find any information out there about Akayesu, the case that the film is about. The only stories I had heard about where rape was prosecuted was the result of the International Criminal Tribunal for the former Yugoslavia. And there were a lot of very famous cases that came out of that. The Foča case being one of them, where women were held in camps, rape camps is what they called them, which is a terrible phrase. And so I was so convinced that was the first time that my co-director and I were already preparing, like, okay, how do we go and scout out in the former Yugoslavia? Who do we meet with? And I was already having meetings with people who had been part of that effort to prosecute that case. And I was promoting our first documentary, and it was screening at the Pickford Theater in Bellingham, Washington. And I was having a glass of red wine called Local Red. It was a local red wine with a human rights lawyer who said, "What's your next film?" And I said, "It's going to be about the first time rape was prosecuted as a crime of war." And she says, "Oh, Akayesu." And I was like, "What are you saying? What does that mean?" And she says, "Akayesu was the first time." And what was interesting was when she told me it was the International Criminal Tribunal for Rwanda. When Rwanda had happened, I was working on Capitol Hill, and it was a really terrible day that we started seeing the news footage of the genocide coming over the television. We had a special feed in the congressional offices. So what had happened in Rwanda had always been a trigger point for me in terms of how did that happen? Why didn't we do anything about it? So to find out that the story actually was this chase for justice for what happened there, it was almost as if all the steps I had taken in my career was leading up to this moment, So it was just by accident. That was the first time, and so it was just...
The best things happen by accident.
Yeah, really.
Yeah. And the movie was pretty intense. When I watched it, that's what I was thinking. And I was wondering if filming it was even more intense, because there's something you want to convey through the movie, but it's never as strong as watching all the footage while you edit. So I really wonder how it was to be in Rwanda filming that.
Well, so when before we ever started rolling the cameras, there was a good year and a half where it was me talking with all of those people you saw on camera, because we knew we were not going to have a narrator. We knew we were not going to have my voice explaining things. So if you're going to have that as your structure, you have to make sure that those interviews are very well prepared, because then the person in the other chair has to tell the story. So I spent a lot of time on the phone with them and in person. I know every voice inflection all of those people have. So we didn't have actually a whole lot of tape, right? So usually with a documentary, you're dealing with several hundred hours of tape. That wasn't the case with The Uncondemned. So I would say that the preparatory year and a half was really intense. I had to, not only did I have to travel to these places by myself to prepare to, I needed to know more about the story than anyone else. And that meant a lot of extra research. It meant going to Congo a couple times, even though Congo's in the movie for 30 seconds maybe at the very end. I was in and out of there quite a bit. It meant meeting with a lot of people, hearing terrible stories, seeing horrible injuries, reports, and and all my friends suffered. My husband type person drove him crazy, because every night I was like, and then look what they did. And he's like, look, I did not do this. There's nobody in my life who could not talk eloquently about rape and genocide at this point. So the preparation was really, really intense. And then the day we finished principal photography, you heard me say last night that I absorbed a lot of the trauma, and the day the day that we finished principal photography was the day that I actually started kind of collapsing physically, because I'd had to hold it together until then.
Yeah, well, seeing all these testimonies and these people, and you just think I couldn't do anything about it. Like, even though you're filming this, you just feel guilty for them, but then you also think, but it's a bad thing for a better thing, because they managed to win the fight at the end.
Well, thanks for giving away the ending. I'm just kidding.
So sorry.
No, come on. First of all, whenever I tell people, I'm like, it was very funny. We had to, part of the way to make the film is a case that happened 17, 18 years ago, right? So we have to kind of have some suspense there. And I remember sitting next to Pierre Prosper during the first screening, and he's watching it, and he goes, do we win? I'm like, yeah, you win, trust me.
That's amazing.
At some point you really, with all of those people that none of them had told the story before, not the lawyers, not the activists, certainly not the women who you see. Yeah. And so part of it became a mission in a lot of ways, because I remember telling my team, look, you guys, this isn't just a story anymore. We're carrying these people's souls with us, because all of them were really counting on us to deliver this film. That made it pretty intense from a storyteller's point of view. But at the end of the day, it was like, okay, it was a really inspiring story, and we knew that I knew that last scene. I knew the first scene, and I knew exactly what that last scene was going to be. So it was actually even. I spent a long time writing the script. That's whenever people say, "How do you become a filmmaker?" I'm like, you better know how to write. Yeah, it's the single most important thing. So I wrote. Once we had done all the interviews, I wrote a 135-page treatment. Now, by the way, treatment's supposed to be 10 pages. I was like, here's my 135 treatment. And my co-director said, you wrote a book. I'm like, oh, I guess I did.
That's only preparation.
Yeah, right? And then I took that 135 pages, I reduced it to 30, then to 10. Then I started writing the script. And I can promise you, I spent many weekends at the office almost crying, going, how am I going to do this? Because again, I have to do justice to these people's stories. And it was really, that was the most intense part of that process, was how do I come through for them when they've put so much faith in us?
And actually, I have a question, but it's kind of when you were in Rwanda, wasn't it dangerous to go around you're a woman, and maybe I don't know how it's like in Rwanda right now, but since the trial wasn't so long ago, maybe the men aren't used yet to the not genocide, and maybe it was dangerous. I don't know.
Rwanda is actually one of the safest places you can go. You can walk around by yourself at night and you're fine, but that's Rwanda, and that's very particularly Kigali, and it's when I landed in Kigali, I was super prepared, like, okay, what's it going to be? And I remember walking off the plane, I was like, this looks like Los Angeles. Are you kidding me? It's very, it's quite remarkable what they've managed to do with the capital city. When you get outside, it's a little more rural, but people were very welcoming and very kind. Again, we travel very quietly. We try not to. I'm not going to blend in, obviously, but we do try to be as unobtrusive as possible. So you take a taxi around, instead of renting a car, and it was just me and my co-director, or just me in some cases, and I would take buses. Now, Congo was a different story, and Congo was dangerous. That was palpable. I had to really switch up my schedule. At one point, I was being followed, so I would leave the country, come back in. I don't like covering conflict. I don't like being in danger. So when you're that jacked up and your body is that jacked up, kind of being aware, hyper aware. I mean, fight or flight is what they call it.
I also read that you wanted to interview Akayase. Directly, but he's in Mali, and you were kind of scared to go there because of what's happening.
Not scared to go there. We couldn't get insured to go there. And one of the reasons was because around that time, there were several journalists, very well-known journalists who had lots of experience, who were kidnapped, and it was a very sad story where they were basically traded in a hostage exchange, and they were killed. And I remember thinking, oh my God, if those reporters got killed, I'm in a lot of trouble, because they knew what they were doing. So it was a combination of things. It was even if we wanted to go, we couldn't get insured, and then I wasn't willing to take the risk to go in.
Especially because you were making a documentary about rape, so people are even less receptive to that kind of reports, I think. When these militias heard that we were doing the film, it wasn't about them being less receptive. They were scared. They're like, oh God, we got to get our story out. But one of the reasons why we didn't ultimately interview Akayesu was that you have to make some narrative decisions, and the film isn't about Akayesu's defense. What is he going to say? I know what he's going to say. He's going to say, the prosecutors wanted to go after rape, so they invented these charges. That's what he has said in subsequent interviews. So it's not really about his defense. Our story is about the prosecution. So if we wanted to make it about the defense, you would be watching a mini-series. We would be sitting around watching a lot of films. And so it didn't make sense to go. But the reason why we got the interview with the FDLR, that militia you see at the end, was because they wanted their side of the story to be out there. So it wasn't an issue of them not being receptive. What you find is these guys are still political, right? So they want to get their political, they want to get their narrative out there. So we really had no problem with people talking. It's very unusual for a film like this. It is very unusual.
Yeah,
and I think one last thing I would like to ask you is you decided to make I personally, with a lot of people, were kind of not really that enthusiastic about watching the movie because it was like a rape movie. But afterwards I realized it was pretty amazing and actually interesting, and I wanted to know how did you make it this interesting? Like, I don't know. I'm pretty surprised. I watched a lot of documentaries, but this one was really amazing.
I'm really happy to hear you say that. So one of the things that we did with this is we told a story. Nick and I wanted this to look and feel as much like a real movie, a fiction movie, as possible. Because like you said, who wants to see a film about rape? I don't want to see a film about rape, and I've seen a lot of films about rape as part of the research. I come back to the fact that we all want to know what to do about it, right? And so that when you make the decision to show that's a message of hope. And they do have some marching orders, like, oh God, they did that in 1997. Humanity got it right. So yay us. Now let's build on that, right? And let's go after these guys. And that's a whole different way to go about something than to constantly say, this is bad, this is bad. We know it's bad. And so you take it the next step forward. And that was really, for me, as putting together the story, I had to be less of a journalist and more of a storyteller. I had to remember the fact that I've written novels, right? And I had to approach it from that perspective. Like, okay, who are these characters? And you do see their personalities. Like, we have some very specific chosen anecdotes.
Yes, actually, yes. The witnesses were totally different persons. They weren't witnesses, they were people before being witnesses. And that's something not all documentaries show, I think.
Well, we made a specific style choice too with the witnesses. We wanted them to be shot in the same way as we shot the lawyers. So, they're in Africa, but you don't, it doesn't, you're not seeing like a mud hut with flies everywhere, which is the stereotypical thing that would appear in something like this. No, these are people with a lot of, with incredible charisma and dignity and smarts, and we wanted to make sure that they came across on the exact same level, because, well, they are, right?
Yeah.
And then also it was really interesting how open those women were, and even Rwandans have said to me that was really a surprise, because Rwandans are not known for being very open with their emotions.
They look like really strong women with all they've been through. You feel it. You feel how broken they were and how freed they are at the time of the recording. You just feel it, and that's pretty amazing.
Well, one of the reasons why maybe you might feel it is because of how we did the interview. They were nervous when they sat down, as anybody would be. They had met me, they'd spent time with me, but not that much time. And the first question I asked them was, tell me why you decided to testify. I never asked them, tell me what happened to you. I knew what happened to them. I wasn't about to put that in the film. But why did they decide to testify? Much more interesting question, and it's a question that puts them in a position of strength and authority right away. And I remember when I asked the question, every single time, each of them would kind of go, oh, okay, this is different. And then they had a lot to say, and it was so interesting just to listen to their perspective of how the trial was going, how they felt they were treated, and then did they feel justice had been served,
You were a journalist, and you transitioned to a filmmaker. And how does it feel like? Do you feel what you were searching for in journalism, and do you plan on continuing?
So, good question. In this, because in the United States we have to write on our tax return what our occupation is. So I find myself writing filmmaker now instead of journalist. I think that, like I said earlier in the interview, that I felt that my whole career was leading up to this particular film. If you had to make a prediction what I was going to do, nobody would have ever, including me, would have said, oh, she's going to become a filmmaker. But I look back on all the choices I've made along the way, and everything was leading here. So, I'm definitely, my focus is continuing on in film. I might do some stories from time to time that are journalistic, but it's much more intriguing to me now to make a film like what you just saw, which has political and social resonance, has a lot of research and investigation behind it, but essentially tells a story. Because I think that's how people, when I think about how I would want to go out and change the world and what has motivated me, it's been very compelling stories that may not necessarily come about through journalism. So I love this medium. I think it's fascinating, and it's collaborative, and I love collaborating.
Yeah, and the movie was aimed to an international audience, right? But what do you shot it yesterday to a much younger audience, I think, and what impact were you expecting on them, or what reaction?
So one of the there are two things. whenever you're making any sort of a story, whether it's a film or something you're writing, who's your audience? And I always looked at this as having a really broad possibility in terms of age and also region. So it wasn't just aimed at an American audience, although there are particular lines that an American audience always laughs at, Europeans never laugh at. And then there are parts where Europeans laugh, and I mean, there's, it's been really interesting to see it with different groups. But one of the things that appealed most to me about this story was that here was a very clear example of people, very young people, coming together from around the world who did this together. And I loved that about it, because how often do we hear about different nationalities making something work, right? And then this question of the age range of the audience, one of the things that was the most important was that it was something that not just people who are my age, really old, but something that people who are younger, could really sink their teeth into. So from the very beginning of even starting this production, we've been involved with different colleges, universities, and even high schools. So, for example, there's a high school in Los Angeles that they've been doing short films based on this film and taking this issue and doing their own version of it, which is great, because I love this idea of having the younger audience start to explore this, because there are so many different avenues to go. It's, whether it's sexual assault on the domestic level, it happening as a result of hazing. We hear about those a lot in the United States, but the idea was, to have younger people take this and really push it forward, because the younger you are, the more you see as being possible. You're not jaded yet. It's like, hey, I could do that. It hasn't occurred to you that you shouldn't try. So always, the target was people who are under 25. I knew I was going to get everyone else, but it was like, okay, let's get these guys on board, and on board in a very active way, because there are just so many amazing ways that this that this issue can be pushed forward, and real solutions can be found.
Yeah, totally. And many people asked questions yesterday night. I was really surprised to see so many people actually ask you questions.
What was really interesting for me were how many people, there were a lot of people asking about my emotional and mental health, and I was very surprised, because that's a very American thing. I was like, wait, I thought I was in Europe, really, and it was very, very kind of everyone. But that surprised me. I really, I actually emailed people on my team. I was like, guess you're not going to believe the number one question. And that's when I knew. I was like, oh, good. They must have actually really gotten into the film, and that's what they were concerned about. It was really interesting. I love the fact that there were so many good questions, too.
Yeah.
So it makes me really excited when we roll the film out in the fall to see what happens, because hopefully I'll be seeing all of you guys again in different venues when we take the real film out. So.
Yeah. And you said that you were going to edit the film. So this was the last time we were seeing that version. What motivates you to do so?
So the version you're seeing was never the final version. So one of the things, we had our official world premiere with what is our work in progress. So nobody ever does that. I don't know why we did it, but it was a great venue. We premiered it at the Hamptons International Film Festival in October, and so 2 weeks before the premiere, my co-director, who was also the editor and the cinematographer, he dropped off the film. He physically drove it to the office, and then he died, unfortunately, in a car accident a few hours later. So so there's been that shock, but Nick and I were always going to finish the film. We just thought we would be done in November, because it would be the two of us going back and, you tiny little edits, you tighten things up, you finalize images, you do clearances for footage, for archival things. The score gets finished, and all of that stuff came to a halt because our team was not only was our team in shock, I mean, everyone around us was. I don't even know how we made it through that premiere, to be honest with you. But we won 2 prizes. We were like the winning film of the festival. So now what happens is we finish it. So as I speak to you, the music score is being finished, and then I will return to New York in a couple weeks, and we have an editor who's terrific, who's coming in to and just little tiny things. But and then we do what's called I would always say making it pretty. It drove me crazy. But what happens now is we color correct. So like when you guys saw it, the blacks, the shades of black were not adjusted, so it looked a little muddy. So that won't happen. It'll be very clean and pretty, and the sound then gets mixed down, and there's a sound design that happens where everything's layered. Again, making it pretty. Nick, I get to say that. So that's what will happen, and that whole process will be finished. Gosh, I really hope it's finished in May, but it'll probably be finished before then. And we are throwing the biggest wrap party ever. So I highly suggest all of you guys email us, because we have this huge multinational, multi-city It's a Wrap party happening, because as soon as we have picture lock, an email will go out, and there will be all these different locations where everyone can go and like have for those who are legal, can have a beverage. But and then we get ready for the big rollout, and so that will happen.
I'll be looking forward for this. I will personally remove it.
Yeah, thank you.
That would sound creepy though, because in the story of documentary, I would never have thought I would have to say that someday, but I would love to see the final product, truly.
Well, good, because we actually designed this film so that you would want to watch it a couple times again. And I promise you, there's so many little things buried in there. We have 2 favorite movies. I'll tell you this, because when you're in the edit room, you come up with all sorts of things to keep yourself entertained. You're like, oh, here we go again with this scene. But we have all these little things buried in there. So not only do you have a multi-strand narrative happening, so like you connected with Lisa's story. And other people will connect with Pierre or Patricia, and then the second time they see it, it's like, wait a minute, so we wanted people to have that kind of an experience. But then for the cinephiles out there, there are 2 shots that we took from our 2 favorite movies. Hands down, my favorite movie is Raiders of the Lost Ark. I love Raiders of the Lost Ark. Nick loves Raiders of the Lost Ark. So there's a shot in there which we very specifically structured to be our wink to Raiders. And then the other source of inspiration for how I structured the film was City of God, the Brazilian film. And there is a shot in there which is our nod to City of God. So for the cinephiles out there, my challenge is, what 2 shots were those?
We're in there.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Well, I'd like then to thank you for the interview. I had a really, really great time, and just thank you for your time and your dedication, and good luck with your movie.
Thank you. Well, you know what? I'll look forward to seeing you and everyone else in the theaters come this fall. So we'll be out. So.
We'll be there.
Yeah, great.
Okay, well, thank you.
Thank you.